Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Shakur Stevenson's co-manager says, a Tank Davis fight is just a phone call away. They make it sound so simple, but it seldom ever is. In the strongest terms possible, Shakur Stevenson and all his representatives are ready to fully launch negotiations with fellow unbeaten three-division champion Gervonta Davis for a lightweight unification bout.
Who wrote this article?
Lance Pugmire, formerly of the LA Times. Why? Because he caught Gervonta Davis a three-division champion when Gervonta has only ever held a full title at 2 weights, not 3. What he won from Mario Barrios was a regular title. At that time, Josh Taylor was undisputed champion. So when did we start recognizing regular titles as full titles? When the American media decided in one voice that they're going to blow smoke up everybody's ass about Gervonta to make him seem more accomplished than he is. That's one. It's all up to Tank. The one thing about Shakur, he will take anyone you put in front of him. Stevenson's co-manager, Josh Dubin, told Boxing Scene on Tuesday, we're here and waiting and ready to negotiate. Through last week, Baltimore's World Boxing Association champion Gervonta Davis was in talks to stage a unification bout against IBF champion Vasyl Lomachenko. However, Lomachenko arrived in the U.S. and told his representatives he'd prefer to stand down and return to fight in the first quarter of next year. According to Lomachenko's promoted Top-Ranked chairman, Bob Arum, with Davis, 29, coming off an 8th-round knockout of Frank Martin June 15th, his alternate plans for a high-profile, lightweight fall bout seem to be down to the 27-year-old Shakur Stevenson or the number 1 contender, William Zepeda. Facilitating his case, Stevenson is now operating as a free agent following his July 6th win over Artem Khatunian in what was the final fight of his existing top-ranked deal. Officials at Davis's promoter, PBC, did not immediately return messages left by Boxing Scene this week asking about Davis's next move. Pay attention. Because so many people these days don't. For the longest time, the story was Spence couldn't fight Crawford because Crawford was with Top Rank. That's what they told you. Wrong side of the street, remember? So that all these years later, Gervonta Davis could go into negotiations with a Top Rank fighter. Top Rank's Vasyl Lomachenko. I thought that was the wrong side of the street. Top Rank. So is that not the wrong side of the street anymore? Make it make sense. Here's how you make it make sense. It was never about sides of the street. If it were about sides of the street, we would have never got Wilder versus Fury 2 and 3. Fury was a top-ranked fighter, and Loma is a top-ranked fighter. Gervonta Davis just tried to make a fight with him, so maybe that whole bit about sides of the street wasn't the truth. Maybe the truth was they were just using that as an excuse to delay the Crawford fight. Enough about that. Back to Davis versus Stevenson. One source told Boxing Scene that there have been preliminary discussions between Davis and Stevenson's representatives. Dubin declined to comment on that subject. We'll know how realistic Davis and PBC's interests are by how financially viable they make it for Shakur, Dubin said. They know Shakur produced the highest-rated ESPN card of the year, so they need to come correct. Dubin said he and Stevenson co-manager James Prince have our phone lines open, ready for a call, and they have our numbers. It's a fight Shakur really wants. He's begging for it for a long time. What Shakur wants to do, let me say it plainly, is to unify at 135. The logical fights to make that happen are to fight the champions. Stevenson criticized Arum and Lomachenko for keeping that bout off limits while Stevenson was with the promotion. Lomachenko obviously knows the outcome, and he walked away, Dubin said. Additionally, Dubin said Stevenson's team asked for a unification attempt at new WBO champion Denis Berinchyk. Check it out. This is a relatively uncomplicated situation because Gervonta doesn't have to work with Top Rank. He doesn't have to worry about ESPN. Shakur's a free agent, free to go wherever he wants to go to do whatever he wants to do. And the question is, how bad do you want to do a fight with him? Because you're supposed to be king shit at 135 and supposedly the face of boxing.
Okay, face of boxing, make the fight.
We couldn't get a straight answer, and that was when Shakur was still under contract, Dubin said, about a Dennis Berinchyk fight. We asked for that fight, and they wanted to talk about a long-term contract. Shakur's own enemy is his own greatness and other people's fear of him, but he has total trust in James and I, and he's also patient. Ideally, his patience is rewarded with the Davis fight, a bout that would match two unbeaten three-division champions in their primes and two highly popular social media figures.
Will you stop calling Gervonta Davis a three-division champion?
That's what the American boxing scene is reduced to. Lying, and lying so often, lying so many times, people start to believe it's true. They don't bother to check. Gervonta is not a three-division champion. Now, Shakur, he is.
Gervonta's only ever been a full-fledged champion at two weights, 130 and 135. Nowhere else.
Gervonta Davis has shown that he can generate more than 1 million pay-per-view buys when he's teamed with a popular opponent, as he was with Ryan Garcia, 1.2 million buys last year.
Yeah, that was last year, and that was with Ryan. Shakur's very skilled, more skilled than Ryan, but he's not as popular as Ryan. So throw that number out the window.
For Stevenson, the bout against one of the sport's most potent knockout artists would be an opportunity to dispel the criticism over the inactivity of his evasive, defensively minded style that has left audiences and critics panning his last two bouts. A similar opportunity seemed possible against the destructive Zepeda, but Zepeda promoter Oscar De La Hoya says he won't permit Zepeda to fight Stevenson unless he signs the Golden Boy Promotions, which by now we all know he's not going to.
So here we are.
For how long have you heard Gervonta Davis say that he's the A-side over all these fighters at or around these weights, or that he's now the face of boxing? How many members of his team have you heard say that? That puts the ball in his court to make the fight with the free agent, because that's what Shakur is. Shakur is a free agent. You ain't got to worry about Bob. You ain't got to worry about Top Rank or ESPN or anybody. Gervonta Davis's assistant coach, Kenny Ellis, said he believes there's a huge chance for the Shakur-Stevenson fight to happen next. Shakur said he would like that fight in November with Tank, so let's see how bad he wants it now. He's not with Bob Arum anymore, so let's see.
Do you think it happens?
No, I don't. I think he ends up fighting the winner of Cruz versus Rayo.
And Shakur?
Might go back to Top Rank, sign an extension, and fight Dennis Berinchyk.
Doesn't that jeopardize the Davis fight?
What would jeopardize the Davis fight?
Going back to Top Rank.
Being with Top Rank didn't jeopardize the fight for Vasyl Lomachenko. They were just negotiating with him. So why would it jeopardize the fight for Shakur? Bottom line, as much as these guys are saying there's a chance it'll happen, I don't believe it will. I believe that Gervonta will end up fighting the winner of Cruz versus Rayo, whoever it is, and Shakur may end up going back to Top Rank because he's facing a scarcity of options without them.
If these two teams want to prove me wrong, make the fight. Make it for November. Get it done. So you'll forgive me if I don't have that kind of faith in these two teams.
In men's junior middleweight news, junior middleweight champion Sebastian Fundora, via correspondence with some other guy, some other person, contrary to the reports that we saw yesterday, he says that the Errol Spence Jr. fight is still on, and all it is that they moved the date. That's according to Sebastian Fundora. What's conflicting is that the reports and a quote saying that the fight was off came from his promoter. They came from Samson Lukowicz. So this is yet another situation where Samson is saying one thing and his fighter is saying another.
But according to Sebastian, the fight is still on. According to Errol Spence Jr., the fight is still on.
Recent set of quotes from Errol state, it looks like Sebastian Fundora will probably be in November or January. Then we're going to line it back up with Terence Crawford.
The hell makes you think Terence Crawford's still going to be a junior middleweight in January?
Veteran boxing scribe Jake Donovan caught wind of these quotes and stated, "This corroborates everything I've been told this week, up to and including last night, that Spence still is in the mix, just that the timeline shifted to later this year. October was never really a firm date, only speculated, never formally announced."
But put your thinking caps on, kids. The fight we just talked about, involving Gervonta Davis and Shakur Stevenson, whether he fights Shakur Stevenson or not,
if he fights in November,
You can't also do the fight between Sebastian and Errol that same month, 2 box office fights on the same platform in the same month, because they're gonna cannibalize each other.
and now we're hearing about January.
Sebastian Fundora was said that he would be medically cleared to return to training in September for a proposed October or November return, but now we're hearing they're playing with January.
For this fight.
Here's what I think.
What?
I think Gervonta might be the one that fights in November against Shakur Stevenson or Isaac Cruz or whoever. In November, I think he's the one who's going to be fighting.
Sebastian?
If they hold to this Spence fight and this Spence situation, that's the fight that'll get pushed back, possibly into the following year.
You know, late December, January.
Jake Donovan added, I was told that the remaining 5 months of the year can see a considerable increase in PBC dates and more free standalone shows than pay-per-view.
What's it matter? Neither of those shows are going to be free standalone shows. Gervonta's next fight is going to be a pay-per-view, and I have no doubts they would bill this fight as a pay-per-view. Spence and Fundora?
It's a pay-per-view. You know it's a pay-per-view. So what about this dramatic increase of non-pay-per-view shows, non-pay-per-view events?
I have to see it to believe it.
Well, we've been hearing about these non-pay-per-view shows they'd be doing on Prime for several months now. At the very beginning of this year, Dan Raphael said the first one might go down in June. Then June became August.
Plant versus McCumbee.
Now the August show is supposedly off because Trevor McCumbee suffered a cut.
Whatever.
It's not happening. These seem like empty promises to me is what they seem like. I won't fault Jake Donovan for whatever it is his sources are telling him. You don't shoot the messenger, but that doesn't mean there's any truth to the message.
Been hearing about non-pay-per-view shows since January. We haven't seen one yet.
Question I have is, if you're talking about a regular show, not pay-per-view, who's going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come from to do the show? And then, how do you get the money back? Because it's not a pay-per-view.
You know, it takes money to do a show. It takes money to pay the fighters their fight purses and production, operational costs. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So if you do a non-pay-per-view show, you spend the money to do it, wherever you get it from. How do you get it back?
Questions that need answers.
Whoever's footing the bill for Plant versus McCumbee, whoever's paying for that, however they're paying for it, whatever money they're investing in that show, how do they mean to get it back if it's not a pay-per-view? And that same question applies to any non-pay-per-view show the PBC supposedly plans on doing. How are you going to make the money back?
This arrangement with Amazon Prime is not the same arrangement that you had with Showtime, that you had with Fox. They were giving you money to do non-pay-per-view shows.
That's how you were doing them.
They were giving you a budget, where Amazon seemingly isn't. No, Amazon's investment, if you even want to call it that, seems like no investment at all. That's why all you've done are pay-per-views, tantamount to crowd-funded boxing.
So then why do they keep telling the boxing scribes they're gonna start doing non-pay-per-view shows?
We are 8 months into this year, practically 8, and they haven't done one yet. Maybe they're doing that for appearances' sake, to keep up appearances.
Maybe.
What we know is we're more than halfway through this year, and they haven't done one yet. Not even one.
So how long are they gonna dangle that carrot in front of the fight fans?
And for what kind of fights? For what kind of fights are we talking about? Plant versus McCumbee, Stephen Fulton versus Ronnie Rios. Let me try not to trip over myself with excitement that Stephen Fulton is fighting Ronnie Rios a year out, more than a year out from the Naoya Inoue fight. And the time it's taking them to get Stephen back out there, Inoue has already fought 2 times going on 3.
But Marlon Tapales, Luis Neri, and he's fighting TJ Doheny in September. September makes 3.
I mean, whatever, man. You guys can do whatever card, whenever you're doing it, with whatever's on it.
Whatever.
As far as the Spence versus Fundora stuff, the only reason that so many people are under the impression, or were under the impression, that that fight was off is because Sebastian's promoter is the one who told them it was off. It was Sebastian's promoter, Samson Lukowicz, who said, the fight is off, Errol Spence Jr. is not medically cleared to fight, or not fit to fight, or whatever it is, so they're shifting their focus over to Crawford. All of that came from Samson Lukowicz. So here you have yet another situation where Samson is saying one thing, but the fighter is saying another. According to Sebastian, the fight with Spence is still on. According to Samson, it's not on.
I don't know what to believe.
We don't know, but here is what we do know. It's been more than a year since Errol Spence Jr. fought. It's been more than a year since the Crawford fight. He's coming off a loss, and it wasn't your run-of-the-mill loss. It wasn't a competitive loss. It's a fight where he took a beating, and it's been over a year since he fought. He doesn't have a trainer right now. He hasn't hired one.
So he's not in training. He's not in camp.
This is
what we know. This is what we know for sure.
What else do we know?
Errol Spence Jr. would be moving up from 147 up to 154 for one of the most awkward fighters in the entire 154-pound division. Under less than ideal circumstances for a fighter in his position.
So when you look at the entire picture, the whole picture, do you have an overwhelming sense of confidence that Errol Spence Jr. is really going to fight Sebastian Fundora under these circumstances? And for what money?
For what money? Errol Spence Jr.'s stock isn't on the up and up, and Sebastian, good kid that he might be, he ain't got a big following, he ain't that popular. You roll the dice with this guy, you're only gonna make but so much money.
So you don't think it's going to happen?
Well, why is Samson Lukowicz running around telling people that it's not gonna happen? Why is he saying that? It's likely because he figures their best bet to get at a big bag is to shift their focus from Spence over to Crawford. Since Terrence Crawford is in bed with the Saudis, and he's a Riyadh season ambassador,
It's a greater probability you could get at a big bag, a big purse.
you don't know what you're going to get with Errol Spence Jr. on pay-per-view in November, or December, or January, or whenever. You don't know what you're going to get with that guy rolling the dice on pay-per-view in what is this unstable pay-per-view market. But with Terrence, you have a greater probability of getting a big guarantee, some big cash, because at least you know where it's coming from.
It's a more dangerous fight, though.
Granted that facing Terrence Crawford is a more dangerous fight. With Errol, you'd be facing an inactive fighter who's moving up to a new weight, breaking in a new trainer, presumably breaking in a new trainer, which makes for a more winnable fight. A more winnable fight, but not more money.
So maybe that's the problem.
Behind the scenes, who knows what's really going on? Who knows what Samson is thinking and what his rationale is? We don't know, but what we do know,
Spence hasn't fought in a year. He doesn't have a trainer. He's coming off a devastating loss. He would be moving up to a new weight.
piracy is at an all-time high. The box office market is in the worst shape that it's ever been because the technology has not yet caught up to the piracy. So for anybody hoping to make big money on pay-per-view, don't get your hopes up.
They know that better than we do.
Pay-per-views these days are not selling like hotcakes, and the more of them you do, the more piracy you create, because there's only so many times a year people are going to give you $80 to see a fight. Samson knows that.
Yeah, but wouldn't the Crawford fight be billed as a pay-per-view?
It would, but with Crawford you might get a big guarantee
Emphasis on guarantee.
that you may not be getting for an Errol Spence Jr. fight. So maybe that's why he shifted his focus, saying they're going to enter into negotiations with Crawford in August.
We'll see.
Crawford wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, and Turkey Al Sheikh wants to pay for it. So we'll see.